Welcome to podcasts from ReEngine Consulting. We're excited to be bringing you tools, techniques, and innovations in the world of public sector continuous improvement so that you and your team can achieve more with less effort.
Welcome to our podcast on quality throughput over operational expenses. I'm Alfredo Mycue. I'm the Director of Strategy for ReEngine Consulting. And joining me here today is John Stevens. John comes from a background of what I would call a very strong but mainstream business background with important career jobs like product manager, marketing director, manufacturing engineer, director of sales, and those type of jobs. And the reason that I brought in my friend John Stevens is I wanted to take some of these concepts for measurement of public sector production of services and then sort of test it on John and get him to sort of immerse himself in the idea of what it would be like to measure our quality, our throughput, and as it applies also to our operational expenses. And in doing so, we would start to invite the question of how do we measure the public value? How do we create value and then represent that as it changes, so that if we from year to year create more value for the dollars that we're given, how can that be measured so that the public, the elected officials can recognize that, and we can use that in a healthy way to hold us accountable within the public sector to know that we're actually improving in a financially viable way. So we're going to take a closer look at this question of QT over OE. Now that stands for quality throughput divided by the operational expenses. So whatever is your quality quotient, sometimes that's represented in an actual number of sort of quality investigations or quality applications that have been determined. Sometimes it's measured in a percentage. So like 0.96% of our work that we didn't have to be done in terms of rework, was done correctly the first time and went through the process and met public need. Our throughput is basically anything that we create, any product that we provide as a government, any services that we provide. So when you dig out your driver's license and have that, that's an example of throughput, right? Because it's a driver's license, so your license plate as well. But even a policeman ensuring safety and security within your community is also a throughput within government. And then the operational expenses are all expenses associated with producing that good or service. So we're going to take a closer look at that today. So why don't you give them a little bit of background, John, about the conversation that we had a couple weeks ago, and your interest in this, just from a citizen standpoint. Like when you look at government, what do you want from government, and what are you interested in when we're talking and when we use the phrase, what's the value that I get for my taxpayers' dollars that are paid for government?
Well, I mean, to me, the two things that come to mind, it's whenever we would have these bond issues that come up for vote. And it's like the two big subject areas here in our town, it's the schools and it's the roads, highway. So I remember a decade ago, I always voted yes because I want better schools and I want better highways and whatnot. So they'd pass and they would get this, $300 million bond or $700 million bond. And then as a citizen, I would watch and go, where's the new school? It's 2 years later, and then you find out, well, we're still doing a study on where we should put it, and where's all the highway? It's like, well, yeah, we don't want. So there's the timeliness. It got to the point where I was like, I want to vote no on these bond issues now because I don't think they know how to spend my money.
So at least they can't demonstrate to you that they're spending it in a way that you expected when you gave them that money, when you voted for it.
Right. So I mean, like, I'm in favor of these things. Go ahead and do them. But give me some information about why is this taking so long, or maybe I don't understand the process. Maybe I think it should be quicker. So,
Yes.
So that was a little bit of why, I want throughput for the government, right? So I can see the results.
And this is like one measurement in a group of measurements that you would expect a public sector organization to have and hold itself accountable to you. So the other ones are probably familiar from you in the business world is, what's my productivity? What is my quality level of what I produced, right? That's the Q that we've been talking about. What's my customer satisfaction rate? How am I meeting their needs? What is my timeliness? How long does it take? What's the cycle time for me to produce something?
Well, that's manufacturing for me in the old days. I mean, customer satisfaction is we got to get this shipped on time. And so then, but if we're having either parts issues will slow us down. We could have equipment issues when we're building on the line that slows us down. So all these things are going to keep us from getting the number so that we can ship to the customer on time. So it's all interconnected, isn't it?
Yeah, due date delivery.
Yeah.
What percentage of our shipments actually met the customer's expectations?
And then the whole quality thing, I mean, heck, they would sample parts when they would come onto a receiving dock. And then I would go out there to find, like, where's my parts? Well, it hasn't cleared quality yet. We'll clear it. We got to build.
Right.
So yeah, quality was always important.
So, and this is just like one slice of those metrics that we were just talking about, right? This is the financial measurement that we're urging here, and we believe is a nice, healthy way for public sector organizations to measure themselves. Because when they measure themselves, I think it's important for them to be able to demonstrate to the public the value that they created, and that there's been improvements in quality, improvements in productivity, improvements of being able to meet stronger or heavier demand within the system. But a lot of times, we don't get credit for meeting that additional demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we overspend our budget because we're meeting additional demands, a lot of times we'll face a lot of criticism. Right? If we underspend our budget, sometimes people come back and say, hey, next year your budget's not going to be as great.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like, you saved the money, but then you lost the money for the next year. That's not right, is it?
So we need to have a way of describing, in a financial way, of describing the work that we do and how much it costs to be able to create that work based upon the relative investment into creating that public. Right, which could be at the very base level is the budget, but it's all of the operational expenses that are associated with that. So if you spent all your budget, then that would be your OE, or your operational expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And then what is yielded is something that we call value realized. So if you're able to produce more or at a higher quality level, or for less dollars than you did last year, then you create this value realized, this monetary description of public value that you create. And you just described why that's important for citizens to be able to look at that and say, hey, I know where my money went, and I know what it did, and I know that they're doing better this year. The government that serves me is doing better this year than it did last year, and I know that because I can see this bottom line. It's almost like a bottom line for government, like P&L, profit and loss.
Yeah, when you go to vote, the candidate's going to tell you all the things he's in favor of, and so you vote for him, and so you know what he's about, and you agree with it, and then a bond comes up, and you vote yes, and okay, I want to see the results. Like it's one thing to say I'm going to do all this, or I'm in favor of this, or but then I'd say it hasn't been well done and showing us the results, right?
Right. Okay. Well, let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to take off for a moment your engineering and marketing and sales hat that you've worn in the past. And I'm going to ask you, as we investigate this concept of value realized and QT over OE measurement, I'm going to ask you to play the role of a state supervisor. Okay?
All right.
And in this this scenario that I'm asking you to play, and there might be some math involved. I have to tell you, John. All right. So in this scenario, you have 4 employees that work for you. Okay. Each of them produce something, one of these throughputs a week.
Yeah.
Right? It could be eligibility determinations for Medicaid or Medicare. It could be an application for a permit to build a home. It could be there's so many, you have to make some decision or some determination or allocate some money or allocate some permission as part of the government service. And each of your people on average does 100 of these determinations per week. So you have 4 people working for you. Okay, John?
Yep.
4 people working for you, and each one of them every week does 100 of these determinations. On average, people call in sick or whatever, but on average, they're doing about 100 a week.
Right.
So how many does the group of 4 people do together?
4 times 400.
400.
400 a week.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we write that down. So they're doing 400 that we have. Okay? Now, you know that this whole website, ReEngine Consulting, has devoted itself passionately to this idea of government improvement, and that there are methods and techniques that have morphed and evolved from what they were in the Lean, the Six Sigma, and the theory of constraints world, and now we're applying them routinely in the public sector. And I would argue that that when you do so, you can find capacity within your organization and deploy that to accomplish your public sector mission. And we see anywhere from 25% to 40% 45% improvement is really the norm. And sometimes sometimes you're able to double or your actual productivity, 100% or more.
Great, yeah.
And that does occur. But in this case, what you've done is you've learned about those arts and sciences of improvement science, and you go in and you work with your team. So you streamline your processes, you consolidate your decisions. Maybe you deploy checklists so that they don't forget things and then have to go back and do rework. So that when someone gets an application, it's complete and it's correct and it's verified. In other words, you're a learning organization constantly looking at what troubled us. Well, why did we have those denials? How can we set the citizens up for more success, right? And you do that. So let's say that you work with your team and you're able to do what I see as the minimum result of improvement, which is you improve your productivity by 25%. You don't add any resources, but you improve your productivity by 25%. You find capacity here and there in the organization.
So I'm going to get 125 instead of 100.
That's right. That's right.
That's my bump.
Right. That's your bump, right? So your folks that are producing 100, if they improve by 25% in terms of productivity, they'll be producing at 125. Okay.
And then it's 500 now instead of as a team.
Right. So as a team now, they're producing 500. And I would like to think that if we had clear processes, if we work together as a team to eliminate some of the frustrations and clarify things that are maybe not the clearest on our website or whatever our public interaction was, so that what we're receiving from them is more complete and more correct, then it's actually easier for your folks to do their work. They're able to achieve more public value for the relative effort that they're expending. They achieve more with less effort.
So if they know that they don't have to work 25% harder to get the 25% gain, they'll be fine with this.
They'll be fine with
but
that.
the typical thing is they're going to think, oh, right, so now we're going to really work hard, same pay. Nobody gets excited about
so we have to, as we introduce the changes, we have to enable them to understand that those changes will be able to help them do more work without the stress, the tension, the friction, and frustrations of what it is. So the part of that is not them not seeing it as a zero-sum game. And I would argue, and I argue in other podcasts and other communications, that in making the folks that do the work part of the process of improvement, so that we can take their ideas and their creative notions and apply them as we improve the work, because they're best qualified to be able to improve that work.
In the old days, we had suggestion box, and we even did that. We had them, and we said, we'll take the box, and then we'll take the suggestion, we'll evaluate it if we see savings in it, and we gave them a piece of the savings.
Yep.
So we were getting suggestions every day.
Right.
And some of these people who were making minimum wage were getting nice little bonuses from their suggestions.
Right. So let's say that you do that.
Yeah.
You work together with your team, you deploy these methods of improvement science, and you improve that by that 25%. Okay? So now you're producing 500 a week that you have.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
Great. And your team's not sweating any more than they used to. In fact, maybe they even feel a little better about the great work that they're able to do. And maybe they're able to meet more public demand. So let's pause for a second on this story, and let's go back in time.
Okay.
Okay? So I want to take you back in time to when you were only producing 400 a week with those 4 people. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then I want you to be in your house on Sunday, and you go out to pick up the Statesman. You pick up the Statesman newspaper and you look at it, John, and what you see is a picture of yourself, and it's a good picture.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's on the front page of the Statesman, and you're like, why is that?
Yeah.
Or and you flip it over. You're like, yeah, I'm not a politician. I'm a supervisor at the state, right?
Right.
You flip it over and you look at it, and it said, not meeting public demand. John Stevens is only doing 400 a week, where his demand is actually 500 a week. And you knew it. You knew pretty much that there was demand out there,
Yeah.
and you had even asked for more resources, but they said, no, you need to keep your nose to the grindstone. There's no more resources available. But you knew that there was more public demand, and that kind of nagged at you as a supervisor. So you're like, oh, look at that. I'm only doing 400 a week, and public demand is 500. And you're reading the newspaper, getting into the fine print, and all of a sudden the phone rings. And you're like, whoop, okay, and you pick up the phone, and the person on the phone says that they're the governor. And you're like, first of all, you go through the whole, like, no, you're not really.
Right. Yeah. Well,
And Governor Abbott says, no, John, I am. I'm your boss's boss's boss.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I noticed that your picture was on the front page of the Statesman this morning. And you're like, oh, well, yes, Governor, that's true. And he goes, I want you to know it was a good picture.
Yeah.
It's a good picture. But we got to get it off of there.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm going to free up some funds to make it available to you. And it doesn't matter how much. I just want to know within 30 days' time that you have addressed this challenge and you're able to meet public demand. We know that public demand is 500. You haven't been, necessarily resourced for that in the past, but I'm good for it. How much do you need, John? I'm ready to write the check.
Yeah.
What do you tell the governor?
Well, I don't know. First thing that popped to my mind is one more person.
One more person.
And then I got my 500 at the same 100 rate.
Right. And what if the answer was still no for some HR reason, even though the
we don't have an open rec.
We don't have open rec or whatever it is.
thing.
Then what would you tell your team if you had to go back Monday and say we got to produce more?
Well, maybe I'd take some of his money to incentivize him.
Incentivize them.
Right. That's
Right.
one.
Another one that you see is overtime.
Oh yeah, overtime. Yeah, but that's old news. I mean,
And it's even more expensive, right?
Right. Time and a half.
Time and a half. Or my favorite is, beat the drums and crack the whip a little more and tell everybody that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't get you too far.
And then the picture doesn't look as good on the paper, right?
That's right. That's right. And it's more stress.
Right.
And more strain on your people that are already working their fingers to the bone, trying to get the 400 that are every week. So it's kind of rings a little unfair too to go there and shout and turn over desks trying to get another 25% improvement. But let's go back to your first response, your first answer. Hire another person, right?
Yeah.
So because another person would be able to produce at the baseline rate 100 a week,
which would get me my 5.
which would get you the 5, which would get your face off of the front page of the Statesman,
Right.
and out of the governor's crosshairs, right?
Yeah, because I only want them calling me on accommodation, not the other.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. So let's think about that. So when you actually went back and did the improvement and did the hard work of improving, and went through and streamlined your processes, documented your standard procedures, captured your checklists, interviewed your customers, seeing how you were doing quality-wise. After you did all that, what's the actual dollar value worth of that effort that you did to go from 100 per person to 125 per person?
Right. Well, in this case, it's a 25. And that's one person of my team. So it is worth a person.
So in an interesting way, when you did the improvement yourself and met that increased demand, you created the value of what you would have in the old system
Right.
before the improvements would have cost you the price of one FTE,
Right. Right.
of one full-time
Yes.
employee that you would have. And so that story, I think, and your conclusion is when we say value realized, that's it, right? But if you don't have a measurement system like this, John, that we're talking about, then why would a government employee strive so much to be able to represent that and squeeze as much as they could through their resources, right? Yeah. So this is a natural strengthening, incentivizing of organizations to be able to improve because now they can demonstrate it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you notice how it's this, if anything goes wrong, you get the phone call. But when you do really good and you don't, it's not obvious, I'm not getting a phone call. I should get a phone call that I just bumped the productivity up, but since it's not measured, how would they know?
That's right.
So then that's why do we care, right? So yeah, I'd love to have a measurement that I could, maybe I should call the governor instead of him calling me. If I could get through.
And so when we try to define this concept of value realized, leveraging this formula of quality throughput over operational expenses, what we came to was that it's the value of the additional work or quality or savings, right, that is made possible through improvements in efficiency, productivity, quality, and leadership, right? So we did some improvement, and we can take that improvement and actually compare it to our baseline system and demonstrate the exact value of what that would have cost us to get based on the old system.
Yeah.
And that is potentially a great way to be able to measure the public sector. And let me ask you, so do you think, what motivates the public sector? If I said the public sector should be motivated by profit, how would that strike you?
Yeah, well, I mean, profit's okay, but I guess greed's not, right? And sometimes people associate the two, right?
Right.
So, profit, well, if the government can make a profit and lower my taxes, that's what I want, right? I never hear that though. And that's the other thing that gets me is how come I hear that 125 people a day are moving into our town and my taxes go up? I'm like, okay, there's fixed expenses, but they're paying too, so that should be covered. But then there's variable expenses, so they should lower the influx of people and should lower my tax. It's not. So somebody elected is in there making decisions like, well, since we got all this extra money, let's redeploy it to whether it's the homeless or to the shelter or we'll fix this road over here, you know. It never seems to ever go back to the taxpayer.
But your logic should make sense, right? And if we are constantly looking for opportunities to do these improvements, and then we can represent that to the public, we can represent that, what my percent improvement was as a manager of this outfit, then we can introduce some of that logic of profit and loss that we see in business without introducing some of the baggage, the perverse incentives that happens when folks in the past have tried to apply that to government, right? As a purpose-driven outfit, public sector, you can't run that as a business because it's not a business. It is a purpose-driven enterprise that's going to get its work done regardless to be able to satisfy that public need to be able to accomplish its mission.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that it can't be efficient,
Right.
as it seeks to have that effect and be effective as well.
And I would love to know, through that efficiency, then we can get that road project done. We can build that middle school or whatnot, right? And as long as it's it's a balanced budget thing, then we have excess that you can spend it on a project that people will like to see it and have it done. So it's all good, but first you have to achieve the gains, and then you have to publicize the gains.
And now there's a way to do that.
Because right now, I mean, when we have that, how do I know what's going on? It's all behind the scenes, right? Right.
And so if we leave it behind the cloud, we'll never know as a citizen. But if we bring it out in a straightforward way to be able to measure the good, purpose-driven work of the public sector, we'll have an appreciation for the good work of our public servants as they strive to improve.
Sounds great. Yeah.
And so that's why that ReEngine believes that this is a very strong, good financial measure to be able to introduce in improvement projects. And today, John, thanks for having us bump that against your knowledge and background and understanding in the business community to see whether or not you see it as a viable way for government to measure itself long term, to stay accountable in your eyes and in the eyes of all our citizens.
Great.
Thanks for joining ReEngine today.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you.
Yeah.